And start the clip. Good morning, everyone. The Contemporary Issues class. We are excited today to have Mark Zwilling with us and talk about music and choir and answer all our questions. Why is there music in church? What kind of music is there in church? What's the difference between the 9 and the 10:30 service? And all those kind of things. So I hope you brought your questions. So welcome, Mark. We are so glad to have you here. And welcome to Zoomers. And before we start our usual announcements, Zoomers, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen. And please feel free to ask questions too. Just jump on in if you have an opening. Don't hesitate, Zoomers. And we are recording this for future playback too. Okay, other announcements. Great sermon today. I'll just throw my own opinion out there. Teaching sermon about substitutionary theory. Sounds like a big word, but if you missed the sermon, it's another day to recommend. Listen to something that was very special. So Mark did a wonderful job of explaining the progressive view, but still respecting the traditional view of the substitutionary theory on the cross. And then tomorrow night is the webinar with Mark and the author of this big read that we're doing, Why Stay Christian? And that should be interesting with time for questions there also. And any other announcements?
Dinner tonight.
Dinner tonight, yeah. Potluck supper, 4:30. Always something going on here. Okay. With that, let's jump in. I'll do a quick introduction of Mark, and then he'll tell us a little bit about what he does here. And also, we have handed out here a handout called Organizing the Music and Arts Ministry of St. Andrew. I wish we had one for you online folks too. Sorry, we don't. We don't have slides today, but we will describe a little about what Mark talks about. So with that, how many years have you been here, Mark? 20, 40? 45 years, 23 years here at St. Andrew. And yes, and before that in Las Vegas and Texas and Dallas. Yes, and in Las Vegas, the choirs, you had a youth choir that worked with Barbara Streisand, and you worked with her on the presentation at one of the casinos. Was it? MGM, yes. So he's had quite the history and experience. Okay, and with that, I'm just going to keep it short and let you tell us about this. And then, we have a lot of questions. We'd love to just talk to you about music.
Thank you for having me here today. So I want to explain the handout that I do have out. Basically, I have taught a class on how to organize a music and arts program or how to do it for large churches. And I always go around the country, and then they occasionally ask in the class, they'll say, have you ever shared this with your own church? And I'm like, no, I don't tell it. And so the staff hasn't seen this. And so, but normally the front cover will say American Guild of Organists or the Fellowship of Music and Art. So the different organizations the front will be what the workshop is, but I just took that off and just put what this is. Sadly enough, it's not really apropos to what we're doing today, but I thought maybe it might be interesting somewhere to see some of the bones of how we do organize the music and arts program. Theoretically, the music numbers match your robe number, that match your slot number, all those kind of organizational type things. And then, some of the past concerts we've had a theater organist come and do Phantom of the Opera and play for prime time and all these different things. And so you'll get to see some of that stuff in there, but most of it's going to be completely not apropos to anything that probably will be important in your life at all, other than kind of looking behind the scenes. And just one other comment about working at St. Andrew. So having a senior pastor named Mark makes it really hard because Mark and I are in so many meetings together that it's very confusing. So usually somebody will say, well, Mark said, and he and I look at each other like, which one of us said this? So we put usually MZ or Rev Mark. So in official staff meetings, it will be Rev Mark and MZ. So they like know which one of us. They don't always remember to do that. Yes.
Before you get started, just a little bit about your musical training, background, education, your specialty in previous years coming up to St. Andrews.
Okay.
Would you mind just a brief little bio?
Some of you that know me have heard this dog and pony show a million times, but so I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My dad was retired military, retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Navy. And oddly enough, we were in Albuquerque. But anyway,
Okay.
So
I'm trying to get the camera right at you.
so my parents were Depression era parents, and they felt strongly that especially a boy in a family, there are three of us boys, should not do music. And so music wasn't allowed in our house as far as any kind of music curriculum. So basically my brothers were physical education majors, which they never used their degrees. I'll just bring that up. But so music was not encouraged, mainly for economic reasons. My parents were very nervous, and they should have been, because it's hard to make a living as a musician. But I secretly practiced I worked at a music store, and I practiced at the music store before I did my work. And so the music store paid for my lessons, and it was done completely anonymously without my parents. So then I was in high school, I became, or actually late junior high, I became the music director at the base chapels. So there were two base chapels that needed music people. And so I directed the music there, and I was terrible, but I was age 14 or 15. And I was terrible. I'm glad they didn't have video in those days. But, and so when I was a senior in high school, they had noticed on the transcripts that I had chorus on my transcripts, and one of the choruses was a girls' chorus. And my dad said, why do you have a girls' choir on your transcript? You're not a girl. And I said, well, I file for them while I was their accompanist. And so when I was a senior, they sat me down and they said, we expect you to get a business degree. And I said, I'd kind of like to go into music. And they said, well, you would have had to start. And I said, I've actually picked up some music. And they said, if you go get a music degree, you must have a full scholarship, because we are not paying for something that you can't make a living on. So I studied my senior year with a concert pianist, and who actually died the next year in a plane accident. But the concert artist was able to bring me to a level that I got a full scholarship to a state school called Eastern New Mexico, and in Portales. So I had a church job in that town at a Nazarene church. So I was able to pay for my own education, and my parents, my parents are no longer with us, but they were concerned till their dying day that I would never be able to make a living, continue to do music. So that gives you a little bit of background. I have 4 degrees. I have a degree in piano performance. I have a degree in what they call piano pedagogy, which is the teaching of piano. I have a degree in choir, and I have a master's in organ performance. So, and that was from DePaul University in Chicago. So that gives you a little bit of background. I hate to tell you that story about the parent thing, but it really wasn't malicious on my parents' part. It was more of concern about economics. And when I lived in Vegas for 10 years and I directed a show there called EFX with Michael Crawford. And one day, Michael Crawford, who was the original Phantom of the Opera, appeared on the Johnny Carson show. And it was the one time my mother said to her friends, my son works with that man that was on Johnny Carson. She didn't really care for the church stuff or or any of the other stuff, but she loved that one of my performers had made it to the Johnny Carson show. So I apologize a little bit for this brochure, just because this is really my dog and pony show for other music directors in other cities that want to know how we organize our music program. But again, I thought it might be interesting for you to see some of the stuff. You know, every couple of years, they'll say, can you come and do that workshop and type of thing like that. So I seem to be known about.
So your
Mr.
reputation precedes you.
A little bit, yeah, probably in other ways too.
Want to just jump in with questions?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I hope this doesn't become too boring for you.
No.
Yes.
How many hymns are in your library? How many songs or written music do you have?
Oh my goodness.
Of my own?
No, in the library. It's huge.
Oh.
Yeah, we have a big library. So the music program really was very strong and very big at St. Andrew before my time. There was a very famous man in our music world named Bill Skoog, and he's now Dr. Bill Skoog, and he lives in, I think he works at a university in Maryland, but he began the St. Andrew Sisters. He began the choir, you know, kind of becoming more high profile, took them to New York and different things. And he used to have a men's quartet that was quite well known, and we don't have that right now. But St. Andrews always seems to have had a very strong music program, even when they first began.
Well, I was
Speaking of-
impressed. I'm not a librarian, but you know, I was impressed when I went to the library to work with Susie, how everything was so defined. And it was easy for me not knowing what I'm doing, you know, just numbers. So I thought it was very good.
Well, it has to be because we have so much music.
Right.
And it has to be all, or I had to reorganize it when I was the music librarian. We redid the whole thing, and I mean, it was basically the same, but we moved all the stuff around it. And, but it has to be because we have so much music. But I would like to sing some of our older hymns that we have that we don't always sing. We don't always need so much new stuff. And you haven't even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question mark is, I don't know, because I don't church shop anymore, what you would say is the comparison in our area, mostly South Metro Denver, of the other music and arts programs in other churches. I'm interested to know, do we have the kind of budget that other churches in this area might have? And also, I am so impressed with the diversity that you're able to bring to this. And I really appreciate the fact that, especially as we're trying to attract more of a certain demographic, that we have the options that is, you know, crowded table, and then we do have the cathedral experience now. So I think that's wonderful to have that choice and option. So I guess my question is, how do we compare with other churches in the area? And I guess, how are we doing?
You know, it'd be super presumptuous of me to
Say
guess. Well, I don't want to speak for the other programs, but I will tell you that Littleton United Methodist Church has the most amazing music director. Amazing. His name's Dr. David Cates, and he has a choir as large as ours is, and he has a very developed music program with graded children's choir program and handbells, and he does some variety, not quite maybe as much variety as we do, but a lot of variety. And he is really an amazing musician with and directs quite a bit of college stuff around this area. So he's really kind of an amazing musician. And then another person of equal merit, and we kind of call us the golden triangle of guys, but is another guy named Dr. Jim Ramsey, who is at St. Luke's. So he directs a huge theater program, and then he's an amazing singer and keyboardist. And they just bought a new organ, so they have a beautiful new organ at St. Luke's, and they have a full church orchestra. They have a smaller choir than we do, but that's what they're actually more comfortable with. They'd like to keep it not as quite as large as ours. I just have a big loft to fill, kind of. But anyway, it's interesting. The Methodist churches in the South Metro area are really strong, and I think they admire what I do, but I think I so admire what they do, and they offer their congregations amazing richness and wonderful. So it's kind of interesting to think, wow, we have so many things and we have so many talented people, which we do, and I'm so glad we offer so much, but I'm very proud of our colleagues that are working in those other churches and they've been, David Cates has been at his church for 28 years. And Dr. Ramsey has been there he came to St. Luke's about the same time I came to St. Andrew. So we're all long-term. I mean, I think there's people in the city wishing we move on to another church so they could come and work with the church. Because I think a lot of musicians would love an opportunity to work, but we haven't given it up yet. So, yeah.
But isn't it true that, well, what I have heard is that most churches that are still financially viable are really struggling to maintain a decent music program. For instance, our neighbor just down the street has gone to professional musicians because it's cheaper than having undervoice choir.
Cherry Hills.
Yeah, Cherry Hills.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Well,
isn't that true or not? Maybe I'm wrong.
I will tell you that the style of worship right now is definitely going to more bands and small ensembles, and it's very unusual, except for these churches I just mentioned, Littleton and St. Luke's and us. It's very unusual to actually find church choirs.
Yeah.
Some of the large Catholic parishes, I mean, they have 4,000 and 5,000 members, and they have maybe a little team of singers that are 3 and 4 people, maybe. And so choirs are a bit of a
anachronism.
Yeah, but I will tell you, this is just my philosophy, is I would love to find, I would like singing to be more of a normal thing. And there's a big article out right now, if you are on social media, and it talks about how there's beer choirs now. Beer choirs. So people go in to a pub and then they sing songs, Sweet Caroline and all these songs. But they talk about how those people in the pubs sing their hearts out, and it's amazing, like these big beer choirs, for lack of a thing. And they said, isn't it a shame that isn't translated to our churches? Yeah. Because a lot of times you're watching the praise team or whatever sing, and you're like watching them give a nice performance, but you're not participating. So I'm excited that I would like to reinvigorate congregational singing if we can.
Just order a keg for next time.
maybe it is the keg that's the answer. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. That's helpful for me anyway. We've had what I would refer to as a blended music program, which we have deeply appreciated. Some have traditional, some have what they call contemporary. St. Andrews has evolved over the years, in recent years in particular. We now were informed just recently that we're going to have a more traditional, in quotes, service at 9 o'clock and a more, use the word, avant-garde, experimental, creative, whatever, at the 10:30. How does that relate to the theology as it has evolved here at St. Andrews? How does it reflect not only that disposition, but who we are trying to attract at 10:30 and 9 o'clock? Music is such an emotional issue. It's like a menu going into a restaurant. Everyone has certain preferences, etc., and so forth to satisfy. You know, I take my hat off. I think we're just amazed at how you've been able to do this in the way you have, most definitely. But how might you explain the shift now that we're going to a traditional and a more contemporary, with reflection of who we're seeking to attract to those services?
I don't know who you are, but you're fantastic. Who is this man?
Gene Dawson.
Gene Dawson, you are like you
I'm
should
just curious.
I know, but you should like be on ABC News interview. No, but I mean that's a very thoughtful, good question. And I wish I had a really good answer, but I'll try to explain a little bit. So I've always prided myself, and this is probably not a safe environment, but I'll just give it a try. But I've always prided myself in, I don't like one kind of music. If you listen to what is in my car, you'd probably have a heart attack, because I like rock music. I love like some jazz, and I love country music. But I listen to organ music, and I listen to choir music, and I listen to symphonic music, and I love piano concertos. I love all this stuff. And I've never wanted my music program to have one style of music. So when I was at the Nazarene Church in Portales, New Mexico as a college kid, and I'd bring all my friends in to come and work and with me to sing and stuff, we were doing, you know, we would do like after the sermon, we'd do like a Bach motet or something. And the poor Nazarene preacher at the time, the Nazarene's very laid back and very kind of, and he would like look back and he'd say, I think we have the only Episcopal Nazarene choir in the world. By the way, I was raised Episcopalian, so so that I have a lot of that high church sense. St. Andrew doesn't do high church very well, but I have tried. But you know, sometimes, like one time early when we were in the old building, so this was way over by the South Glen Mall, when we were over there, I said to the pastor at the time, I said, we're going to have the choir process. And he said, well, you can try that if you want, but I know it. And so I looked at the choir processing, and they were like high-fiving people. And I'm like, no, we just want to like walk down the aisle. But this church does not. I mean, I said to my friends early on at St. Andrew, and this is actually a compliment to this congregation, but at that time I said to my friends, I said, they are so hokey. They're so down to, and I said, but St. Andrew's they really want a very authentic experience. You notice people don't particularly dress up, overdress here, or people are not like, oh, you know, look at me. But it was a very down to earth. And then my first worship experience, they said, and our youth today are being led by ex-cons. And I'll never forget getting home and calling, my mom was alive at the time. I said, Mom, the youth group is led by ex-cons. But of course, that's their ex-confirmands. It was their nickname. But I thought they were ex-cons. But anyway, but to answer your question, I've always blended the music because I like a lot of variety. And by the way, the 9 o'clock is not going to be that traditional. I'm going to blend it too. But Rev Mark and the leadership and has felt like St. Andrew is probably the size that should offer a different experience other than just having two experiences that are fairly identical. And believe it or not, for a long time, I wasn't on board. And I have to tell you, this church was the most lovely and kind to me because they basically said, think of, they just started planting the seeds. What if we did this? What if we did that? Part of it is the personalities. And I'm telling you that Justin is so lovely to work with. And he respects the traditional music so much. And he's actually the traditional music director at Mission Hills. So he is considered the most traditional they have. So he is the traditional music worship guy at Mission Hills. He does the early service there. And so because of Justin's personality and Mark and other leadership people just saying, is there a way we could offer something completely different and maybe allow the 9 o'clock to even become more of what St. Andrew is so lovely and good at. So we're good at lots of small groups and big choir and orchestra. And then why don't we offer that and do it the best we can do, but then offer something. And then you brought this up about the theology of the church. And Mark said, why can't we offer a contemporary music experience at 10:30 with the theology of St. Andrew instead of having not the best of theology for St. Andrew being imposed on by contemporary music at 10:30. So if you'll notice, and I know you're here now, so you're not hearing what's at 10:30, Justin actually brings in a lot of what we call more open theology at the 10:30 through that genre of music. So, and then Justin does not like praise and worship. He doesn't like what some of the churches in this area offer that, and they do it well. But Justin, that's not what he likes. He likes spiritual music that actually has meaning for people, but also good theology. And so they finally said, I think it's time for us to do this. And they let me, I don't know if you noticed, you probably don't notice, but this fall, we were fumbling around trying to dip our toe in the water. And Mark finally said, how about January 1st, we go hard? But I'll tell you what was confusing for the congregation is on January 15th, we always usually offer a band that day because it's Martin Luther King Sunday. And we used to have Uncle John's band. So we'd always offer a band experience that day. So I had already gone down the road and planned that. And Justin said, that's a day that you have me doing both services. So it's not really the cathedral experience at 9 and not the contemporary. It's all the same. So that was a little confusing for our congregation. But I think going forward, you'll see more of a delineation. But I will tell you a secret. I don't like straight traditional services. So the 9 o'clock is still going to have some different stuff. And I have a feeling that some of the 10:30 will have some different stuff. So it's not going to be like one church you go to that the contemporary people don't talk to the if you notice, a lot of the crowded table musicians are in our choir and stuff. So it's not like there's this big divide, but it is more divided than it used to be. And that is an intentional decision. But the theology we're hoping will match at both, but in different styles. I hope that kind of gave you an overview.
And marked by contemporary at 10:30, we're not talking about the rock band with the distortion, electric guitars, and repeating the same lyrics over and over.
I hate 7-Eleven.
Now they do
7-Eleven music.
What do you
Seven
mean
words sung 11 times.
they do more repeats than I do, but I mean some contemporary music is just longer. It's kind of longer than some of our other things, but anyway, I have to tell you that as a longtime staff member, they really kind of let me come to my own. I just started thinking about it and what I wanted to do, and that was kind of hard, but I wanted to get out of the way and do what serves the church the best. And to be honest with you, we have to offer something different or we're not getting the people back after the pandemic. I mean, we really try to make it seem like, oh, things are back, we're normal, everything's going really well. We still have wonderful views online. We have thousands of views on a weekend, so that's interesting. But as far as getting people in the building, which really we built this big building, I think probably if you got Mark in a hallway and said, what's really going on, he would say, I'm trying to think of a way to draw other people in that are not here yet. And we do get comments sometimes of like, do you offer like some different kind of music? We love what you're doing, but we'd like something different. So I'm actually excited about this change. And I will tell you, if it wasn't Justin, I might be a little more nervous, but Justin has been lovely to work with. Yeah.
I want to ask our Zoomers if they can hear us okay still. Susan, can you? Okay. And if any of you have a question, please go ahead and ask. Anybody have a question at the moment? I know it seems like you interrupt when you come through Zoom, but okay, just wanted to offer you that. Okay, Carol.
Young people, are you drawing in the young?
Well, we haven't done this very long, but I think that is a good question, and we have noticed a very slight. I mean, this is very just within a couple of weeks, but we have noticed a few younger families that have gone up and asked Justin questions, and around Father's Day. This is, I know me, I always think ahead, but around Father's Day, I'm going to try to put a contemporary family choir together. So, and have Justin lead it and kind of learn some contemporary songs, but allow families to sing kind of on Father's Day. It's kind of, I used to do a women's choir on Father's Day, but I'm going to change it up this year. And so we're trying to think of, and they're going to start offering baptisms at 10:30 to try to draw. Our children's choir will sing when they do at both 9 and 10:30, but they'll do 10:30. Our youth choir today is singing in there. So those are younger demographics. So we are aware that we're missing the boat in some of that area.
How about Carrie?
Carrie.
This is just a personal curiosity about your affiliations. I had the opportunity to work at Oklahoma City University, which is a Methodist funded university. And they are well known for their music, performance, pedagogy, all kinds of things. But they have wonderful programs in choral development. And I'm just wondering if you had any affiliation or any opportunity to work with them and perhaps have students as interns and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
they have choral composing, all kinds of things.
Yeah,
there.
I haven't had that experience. Okay. I know of them, but yeah.
Okay.
And picking up on Carrie's comment, do you have any connections with the Lamont School of Music at DU? Because it addresses in part what she was talking
So
about.
if you've seen Jared, right. He's a wonderful singer, but also directs our men's group. He's from DU. Okay. And so he got a music business degree from them actually, but he, I do know the director there, Catherine Saylor, and she's helped me on various projects and stuff.
Is Jared the solo, does he sing in the, he's at the opera voice?
The opera voice.
Well,
is that Eben you're talking about?
It's probably Eben that we have two, Eben, who's a professional tenor, and then Jared, yeah. Eben was, Epan's story is very interesting. His accompanist, professional accompanist, lives at Windcrest. And so he was at Windcrest one day and he said, what am I going to do? He said to the accompanist, he said, my family wants a more open church. And she said, well, where do you go? And he says, we go to a Catholic church. And he said, but I would like a church with a choir. Do you know of any? And she said, well, do you know St. Andrew? And he said, I've never heard St. Andrew. And he called me and he said, do you have a choir? And I said, yes. And I said, I'd like to hear you sing first. So he came over and sang for me and he says, I just want to join a choir and my family would like to come too. He said, are you guys really open? And I said, yes, we're very open. And I said, a lot more open than Catholic Church would be. So.
He has a beautiful voice too.
Yes,
Susie?
I'm on the new member committee and we had a luncheon 2 weeks ago and we got 17 new members and we had a lot of younger families with kids. So we are getting younger, with teenagers or one lady and a baby, one couple had 2 kids. So in these luncheons that we have periodically, we are getting new members with younger people, with younger, with kids and younger families.
Good.
So.
Okay, I better take my wife's question, then I got a question. Go ahead, Vic.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would like for you to speak to your Christian growth through your ministry here.
Christian growth.
Or your spiritual growth.
Well,
let me put it that way.
I will tell you that I was in a gospel group in late high school years. And I think we were probably the beginnings of what was called praise teams later, but we had 8 singers, 8-part harmony, 8 mics and drums, 2 keyboardists, I was one of them, and bass player. And we traveled all over. They were called Rebound and they recorded heavily. They were amazing people, but very conservative theology. And I liked the conservative theology. And when I got a little older and also came out of the closet, I had a wonderful girlfriend that was another music director. She's actually left the music director business, but she was a wonderful music director. And she said to me, I'll never forget, holding my hands. And she looked at me and she said, you need to get to a church that has better theology than what you have. And she says, I think you should look at St. Andrew in Littleton. And at the time I was at church in Dallas. And she said, please check that. And I said, I don't want to move to Colorado. I don't like Colorado. They have focus on the family and amendment 2. And I just think Colorado is just a very narrow-minded. And she said, I think you need to look at St. Andrew. And I said, what about you? And she said, they turned me down. And I said, well, they turned you down. You're terrific. And she said, I think they would actually look at you. And so I threw my hat in the ring at the time that St. Andrew was looking. And I will tell you from my spiritual growth, being at a church with more healthy theology and more open theology and allowing me to be really who I am has been incredibly healthy. So Sue came through town. She lives in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, but she came through town and we had lunch with her and her family. And she said, how did the theology thing work out for you? And I said, it was a very life-giving thing for me. And I said, you were right. I said that theology was an important aspect. So yay, St. Andrew. So
great story.
How helpful? How helpful is feedback? Because of the diversity of interests, you're in an educational role. You're also trying to educate us as to newer forms of expression and music. At the same time, we have these lifelong preferences that we've grown up with. Is getting feedback or having feedback mechanisms by which you get input. How helpful is that? Because I like plain song, and I like some of the more Catholic type music, as well as some of the more contemporary, and as you say, Western music, etc. Is it helpful or not helpful to get feedback periodically? What do people want? What do young people? We think we know what young people want, but what do they really want? Unless they have a chance to express themselves.
That's such well, the interesting thing is St. Andrew is kind of like I said, was kind of authentic or hokey. I said, you know, but let's just say this congregation has no problem with feedback. If you knew how many, I mean, Mark alludes to it, but Mark gets so many emails, and Lana does, and I do too. Usually when things are not to their liking, what's interesting is even when I've done a big Christmas program or something, I get very little good feedback. I only get usually feedback, and that it surprises people because people say, oh, I want to give you a compliment, but I'm sure you've heard it. I'm usually like, no. Part of it is I'm up front and people are leaving, so they don't talk, or they say, oh, I'll send them an email. And then I would love to hear both good and concerned feedback, but not to be coy about it, but actually all of the staff depends on some feedback, or we don't know whether what we're doing is in the right direction or not. It doesn't always completely sway us one way or the other, but it's good to have that feedback.
Okay, Mark.
That's
good. You're good. You're totally good. But that feeds right into my question about clapping after music. That's feedback from people saying, I like what's going on. But other folks say that's not the place to clap. It should be respectful and quiet and silent after even a great performance. What do you think?
Just as an aside, did you notice that they didn't clap after Set Me as a Seal?
It was awesome.
It was wonderful. Everybody went.
Do you like it, Mark, when we clap or not?
So as a music person in worship, an Episcopalian, I do not like applause at all.
Amen.
And if I could tell you how many staff meetings in this church through my 23 years have been devoted, I could tell you a couple other topics, but I'm not going to go there. But
I can't hear it.
If I could tell you how many times that the clapping conversation has happened, and I'll tell you where the congregation or where the staff has come down on is when you go into a church and they have a bulletin announcement that says no clapping is allowed. When I go into a church and it lists, you do not do this, we do not like this, we don't want this, it just instantly puts a whole damper on it. And as much as the staff, I don't think likes the clapping and sometimes the clapping is just totally at inappropriate times. On the other hand, we don't want to mandate there's no applause at this church because it becomes a very kind of legalistic thing. So we've erred on the side of letting people have hopefully moments after like Set Me as a Seal that they'll sense that this is not a really good time. It doesn't always work, but it works sometimes. And we try to like move on, like Rev Mark, this is a secret.
Okay.
Can we pause recording?
Pause the recording and then put up your hands. Rev Mark really doesn't care for applause after his sermon. And he doesn't care for the applause after a sermon. And he's asked the staff, what can I do to stop the applause? And so a couple of times he started praying after the sermon because they're less likely to do that if he offers a prayer. But he's like, give me ways that I cannot encourage that, because he really doesn't think that's
we can just spread the word.
Yeah.
Too.
So lead by example.
Yes, Mark.
So
I'm confused, about the applause thing too. And I get my cues by looking over at the clergy to see what they're doing. And I notice there's a mixed, some of the clergy applaud and some Mark doesn't. So if there's a suggestion, I guess, do as a clergy do.
That's not a bad idea, but I could bring that up.
Yeah.
They'll know that I've taught a class again. They're gonna, oh, you've gone to one of your classes.
What he could do though is rather than doing takeaways as a bulletin or bullet points, is to incorporate the takeaways into a prayer.
That's an idea. Kill two birds with one stone.
Sure. You can take that to him.
Yeah. Could you give a concrete example of how you integrate traditional Christian values into avant-garde music? Because you said we would carry those values into the 10:30 service, but how do you integrate that into that music?
So a lot of the times the music is not, we spoke, were you able to be at the 9 o'clock service? So, he spoke about atonement today, the substitutionary cross thing. Well, you can be assured that Justin doesn't do any atonement music. So he doesn't do any music that talks about the blood of the cross or the Jesus saved me because he died on the cross. You'll be assured that Justin does not do that. And it's actually his theology as much as Mark's. I get away with it at Lynn a little bit.
Justin also uses inclusive language in his music.
A lot of inclusive language.
A lot of inclusive. In fact, last week he used they, the pronoun they, when speaking of God the Father.
Interesting.
Which is, it is biblical. God says, let us create. And so I loved it. But I noticed it. And so if there's any feedback for him, and I wasn't able to catch him, but I love that he uses inclusive language in his music.
And you notice today that on even the opening hymn, we use kingdom, not kingdom. And so kingdom is more of a thought that it's all together and not just a king looking over.
That was not a typo.
Yeah. We did have people say that it was a typo.
We got about 10 minutes left. Sharp.
I was just going to say back on the applause thing. In a previous church, a Catholic church, at the end of the Mass and the benediction, the priest would always say, and, didn't our choir, can we all just show some appreciation for the choir? And everyone clapped then because it was a great choir and people were happy to, but it just it was the culture. That's just the way it was done. So there wasn't the interruption in between. It would have been inappropriate.
Germany.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in Germany. And when I first came to the United States and go to the church here, people would dance around and they would clap. And they had guitars and all kinds of other instruments to play the music. And I was shocked. Because, really, because I had never seen people clap in church or, dance around or even play some other instrument but the organ. We had these big, huge organs, and that's where the music came from. So I had a real hard time here. And even today, sometimes I'm just, God, I don't want to be here. But it is really strong the way you grow up. Yes. And what you feel. And many of the things that you address, are part of this. Tradition. Yeah.
Do very few churches have organs anymore?
That's true too.
That's true.
He said that's true.
Yeah.
St. Luke's bought a new one.
And they have the symphony organist, so they have quite a good organist there. So the Colorado Symphony organist is the organist there, and he's amazing. And
imagine there's still companies that make organs.
Yeah, there's actually
Alan.
Yeah, but it's unusually still pretty strong in an odd kind of way. Yeah.
Is it twice as hard to play the organ than it is the piano?
Nah.
No.
You've got
It's
another
You gotta
keyboard
use
and
your
you got the
feet.
foot pedals. No, not really?
no.
Okay.
It's not that hard.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One thing that I appreciate about St. Andrew is that we come to this worship time from so many different areas and backgrounds and everything like that. And I like that we have the freedom to worship the way we want to worship.
Yeah.
Some people, I come from a very conservative, where we worshiped very, like very demonstratively, and I'm thankful that I can come here and raise my hands if I want to in a song, and it might offend somebody else, but I don't worry about it. And you know what? I think that's the way it should be. I do think that's the way it should be. And I will comment on the clapping. I have watched new people come before, and when people clap after a performance or the sermon, these people will kind of look at each other like, what? Clapping after, and so I don't know. I wish too, for Mark's sake, I wondered if that didn't kind of grind on him.
The interesting thing is a couple of times, don't hate me, but a couple of times I really did think the sermon was so powerful. It was, the clapping was almost moving for me, like, yeah, I mean, then it gets to be a habit, and I don't like that as much, but it's like sometimes when it's almost a response, almost a genuine response to something, it can be powerful.
Kind of agreement. Yell amen.
Precisely. Go Baptist. Amen.
It's like clapping after a spiritual or rocky song.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Or children.
But to clap after a prayer. I do have a comment. When you all have meetings and you're talking about clapping, I think it would be helpful if none of the pastors ever clapped.
Right. Lead by example.
See, sometimes because everybody's clapping, then they'll go, and no, if they don't do that at all, maybe
that may be a little above my pay grade, but telling the pastors how they should act, but normally.
Thank you. I'll cede the floor to you, Gina, for this, but I was curious to know, are we going to continue using hymnals? And I think we had talked about this in our previous meeting here last Sunday. Will we keep using those? And I know that today there was a response, 3303, I believe it was, in the bulletin. And I was like, where's that?
Guess what? Guess what? So there's a new Methodist hymnal. So you notice the 2000s are the black smaller book. And then so the 3000s are a green new book. So there's a brand new one, and I love to steal some things out of that. And of course, the clergy are like, where's that number? And I'm like, that's the new hymnal. But I said, so I don't think there's any discussion to not use the hymnals, but I will warn you, we are using more and more songs that are not in the 1989 hymnal. So
will we ever share the notes out on the screen or anything so people can
we've talked about that. Sadly enough, the notes just don't, it's really kind of hard to get both the words. If you notice, they're putting very few words on the screen, so it's clearer. Mark only allows 4 lines.
Wow.
So sometimes if something has more than that and there's notes, it's really gets diluted. So, but I am kind of sad that I'm not able to give people resources to do better, because our congregation would, and they would love that. But
well, some of us just make up our own harmony.
This whole question of interactive and participatory, people can be passive worshipers, or they can be interactive, and it has a lot to do with personality, disposition, and background, and so forth, but refrains from the congregation with the choir to make it sometimes on occasion participatory, just to give the parishioner in the pew an opportunity to be a part of the experience rather than being a passive recipient. Opportunities for that, perhaps, Mark?
Yeah, I've done that, some of that,
Right.
you know, but I think you're right. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think the way worship works, especially in mainline churches, and when I've done a workshop on this, is my theory is the way to make traditional worship and mainline worship work is through creative use and participatory use of the congregation. And now that COVID's a little bit behind us, I would like to use the room more, because I used to use, I love choirs in the back and choirs on the sides, but I just, for a while, they said, do not move those people around. They're spitting on people. So, you know, I mean, I had to keep the choir localized, but you'll notice I would love to do more antiphonal stuff and things like that. But you're right. The way that our church, this is my feeling overall, maybe a closing statement, but is I think the way St. Andrew thrives and becomes better and better is to continue to be as creative as possible, so that people feel that there's a newness and that there's life. And to be honest with you, because I'm getting older, I always worry that what if I've run out of new ideas? I don't feel that yet, but I always want to make sure that I'm serving the church in the most creative way as I can, and constantly learn new things. And some of those things are a good reminder to be participatory with the congregation. So.
May we clap for you?
Yeah.
It's okay here, because we're not doing music at the moment. Yes. Well, that's a good stopping point for us, Mark. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts, and hope you'll come back again.
Yeah.
Sometime.
Thank you.
Just a quick prayer. Don't clap during the prayer, but we're so thankful for Mark and his music ministry. Please bless him for many years to come. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Drop
Susan.
kick me, Jesus, through the goalpost of life.
I thought for a minute.
Oh, yeah.